Is there a cure for fear? Do we even need a cure for fear? Here to talk about the emotion of fear that we've all experienced in our life. Dr. Lamb, psychiatrist and MedCircle doctor. Welcome back.
Thanks so much for having me, Kyle. Pleasure to be here.
There is some popular content going around YouTube right now on this idea of the cure for fear. Do we even need to look at it like that, like curing our fear?
So I would, as you might know, I think you queued me up for that perfectly. As you might know, because I conceptualize anxiety as a physiological experience in the body, I would suggest that we don't want to cure our fear. That what we really want to do is be able to notice it, attune to it, regulate any symptoms that we're having, and then try and understand it. Because if we don't, if we just eradicated all fear, right? We'd be walking around and a lion could be next to us and we would just try and pet it. Or a baseball could come through the window and I might stand in front of the window and let it hit me. That anxiety and fear, and we can differentiate those two, are actually really useful information that our body gives us. That there's a stimulus in our environment that then allows us to, that our brain takes in, creates a physiological experience in our body that allows us to then understand, hey, there's something in our environment that could be a threat to us. And this is where I differentiate fear from anxiety, that both of the physiological sensations are the same, that kind of just in relation to semantics of what's fear and what's anxiety, that fear would be a physical threat to my physical body. So if there is a lion in the room, right, that's going to create fear. And anxiety is an emotional threat. So at times we learned that it wasn't okay to have anger in relationship or sadness in relationship or have needs in a certain way in relationship. And so when those needs or feelings come up, we get anxious because at one point in time, it felt as though it was a threat to the relationship that, again, in childhood, was life-sustaining, right? We relied on our families of origin for food, clothing, and shelter. And so if there was an emotional break, we were actually really at threat. And so our physiology can respond very similarly when there's an emotional threat in the same way that it would if there's a physical threat. But I would suggest that by definition, fear is a physical threat and anxiety is an emotional threat.
I want to dig more into this relationship between fear and anxiety, Dr. Lamb. I would assume that if you are feeling fearful, you definitely have anxiety, but you could be feeling anxious and not have any fear. Is that correct?
Yes, exactly. Well, and so that the anxiety, so we kind of overuse, I think, the word anxiety as the physiological response that comes up with fear or emotional anxiety, fear of a physical threat or fear over our emotions, which we would call anxiety. So it's a matter of semantics, and lots of different kind of theories of mind and psychology may differentiate these a little bit differently. But I think across the board, we will commonly say that fear is about a physical threat, anxiety about an emotional threat, and that the physiology of the experience either way is going to be the same. And this is what's really interesting, is that if there's a lion in the room, my autonomic nervous system, my fight or flight system is going to get activated in the exact same way as if my partner threatens to leave or I have an emotional threat. It's the same physiology that gets activated where fight, flight, or freeze with that autonomic nervous system can get activated to where our bodies have a real physiological response that I would again say is anxiety.
I think without the context, people hearing about good fear in the workplace would question that statement. How could there be such thing as good fear in the workplace? But A, do you think there is such thing as good fear in the workplace? And what are some examples of that? And then I would love to hear some examples of what would be considered bad fear in the workplace.
So if we go back to physiology, I would suggest that good fear in the workplace is actually excitement, or a call to action, right? So if we are being called to engage, if we are being asked to step up and do more work and engage in a project that's meaningful, our nervous system is going to be activated in that fight or flight system, the sympathetic nervous system, our heart rate's going to increase. We're going to have increased blood flow, increased respiratory rate, that we're going to get excited about what we're doing. Now, those same physiological sensations might be labeled by someone as anxiety. And so we have to differentiate and tease out, is this excitement and activation energy, or am I actually feeling nervous? Am I feeling some kind of an emotional threat because my boss is coming down on me and I'm fearful of my boss, that he is a threat, probably not actually physically, but emotionally and potentially in real ways that could harm, my employment, those kind of things. So I would suggest that good fear is activation versus bad fear being there's something toxic and threatening in the relationship and in the environment that needs to be teased out and figured out, and a solution needs to come so that someone doesn't feel flooded with anxiety because of the work environment, because it feels unsafe. So safety is probably another key piece to this, that with good fear, we're talking about something that probably feels safe, whereas bad fear is an unsafe environment. And that's going to be individual to the person experiencing it.
If somebody is fearful of their anxiety, which I've gotten a lot of emails about, I am worried or scared that I will have a panic attack or have anxiety that I cannot manage in the workplace, what does that inform the individual of with themselves, and how should they cope with that?
So it's incredibly common. And so I think just first acknowledging that this isn't just anxiety, it isn't just a physiological response that's coming up, that there's also something on top of it that's bringing in worry over the anxiety. And this is where I've talked with you, Kyle, quite a bit about this inner bully. Right? That if anxiety comes up inside of me at the workplace, it's going to happen, right? If my boss comes in and I have a deadline coming and I want to perform, and some of the excitement, but also, feeling tenuous in the relationship, anxiety is going to come up in my body. I can notice that, I can regulate it, I can understand it. But if I get anxious as my physiology happens, right, then this bully comes in and is like, oh no, it's going to get worse. You're going to have a panic attack in front of your boss. Oh my gosh, you're so crazy. All the stuff that can come in that really exacerbates this. So identifying that bully is so important so that we can learn to speak to ourselves in a different way around anxiety. And that's where education around anxiety, I think, is so important. And it's why I kind of push away the notion of a cure, because this isn't, as I've said before, right? This is not a purification process. We don't want to not have anxiety, because we actually need that data and information. If there's a threat in my environment or something needs to activate me, that's a wonderful thing. I want to be able to see these sensations and activation of my body as information rather than see it as a problem. Oh my gosh, I'm getting anxious. No, oh my gosh, my body's giving me some information that's going to help me in this environment to understand what's going on when I can use this information effectively. So it's so important that we tease out that if there is a bully in our heads, can we notice it? Can we start to cultivate a different inner monologue that says, I know this is fearful, that I know that it's anxiety provoking to have anxiety. It's going to be okay. Let's take a breath. Let's pull on those tools that we might have to bring the anxiety down. It's going to be okay. As opposed to the catastrophic voice that says, panic attack is coming, you're going to look like a freak, all the things that can go on in our heads. And that inner monologue I've seen to be probably the primary problem in anxiety regulation that gets in the way. That when we do breath work, when we do body scans, when we do grounding, our anxiety comes down physiologically. But if that bully is in the room, it's like lighter fluid on the fire. It's very difficult for these tools to work when we've got that bully in the room. So noticing, regulating, and acknowledging that bully is going to be really important.
I love your statement of this is not a purification process. People really dive into their mental health with that goal, as though there's a finish line to this. And then at the end, you just walk around happy all the time. And that's obviously not the case. I wrote that down from a workshop you and I did for MedCircle members. And right above that, I wrote reparative versus punishing thoughts. and being mindful of thoughts that come in that are beneficial, helpful, accurate, true, realistic, and the thoughts, the lies we often have on repeat in
Right.
our brain all the time. We don't even realize we're telling ourselves that.
Absolutely.
And from that workshop, Dr. Lamb, I said, I would never, ever, 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 ever speak to somebody I like or love the way I speak to myself.
Absolutely.
And that is just, it is a constant effort, at least for me, to proactively stay on top of it.
Absolutely.
And not so to the point where I then feel bad when I don't stay on top of it. You know what I mean?
No,
So
that's
then you're
that's
feeling bad.
PhD level self-attack, right? I attack
Yeah,
myself
right,
for
right.
attacking myself, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
I know. Well, certainly I could talk with you all day, but eventually the video must end. Dr. Lamb, thank you for coming on our YouTube channel, MedCircle at Work. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. And if you give us a thumbs up, extra thank you to you. I'm Kyle Kittleson. Remember, whatever you're going through, you got this.